Welcome to Season 7 of the Charity Matters podcast. I'm Heidi Johnson, nonprofit founder, lifelong helper, and your host. I've been interviewing modern-day heroes for over a decade with my blog, and I love sharing these inspiring conversations with our podcast. Join me as we learn the challenges and stories of innovators, entrepreneurs, and modern-day heroes who set out to solve the problems of humanity. Have you ever thought about the power of the connections that have shaped you to be who you are and where you are? Well, today's guest is no stranger to this fact. Marcy Gilbert is one of the founders of the nonprofit Calibrate, and I'm so excited to share her amazing journey and our inspiring conversation about what she's doing to make a difference in our world. We are so excited to have Marcy Gilbert today here from Calibrate. Welcome, Marcy. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Heidi. What an honor and a pleasure to be here.
We are really excited to hear about you and learn about your work with Calibrate. So why don't we just dive right in and tell me a little bit about what Calibrate does?
So Calibrate has three primary activities of focus right now. So one of them is we want to provide the social emotional foundation for our youth in under-resourced communities to be able to thrive. And we do that through a program we call Connections, which is a proven program. It's been researched. There's tons of data on it. It's been in Los Angeles schools since the 1980s.
Oh, wow.
And our second activity is we are interested in creating a virtuous cycle of generational health. And so we are training young adults from our communities, typically these are alumni of our Connections programs, to go back and reinvest in their communities. And so Calibrate is raising money in order to pay those young adults to go back and reinvest in their communities by leading Calibrate's operations and leading the Connections programs. And then the third activity that we have is coalition building, because we know that to have impact,
Right.
Really big impact, we need to all come together and work as a village.
Absolutely. That's the village is the core of everything. It's really the core of nonprofits. It's the core of everything we do. When we talk about, people think, oh, nonprofits or charity. It's really about just community, right? It's literally about creating community. And at our core, when you even think about, if you go way back, it was all about the village. It was about that little community that cared for each other. And at the end of the day, that hasn't changed. We're still doing that, right?
Yes.
In different ways. And sometimes our village expands and we go to global places, and we go to all sorts of things, and that's a whole other conversation. But I really think if we all just took care of our neighbors in our own village, the world would be a really fantastic place. We went back to kind of that grassroots, take care of your next door neighbor model. Well, let's turn the clock back a little bit, because I know, just curious, like people don't just wake up and start a nonprofit. There's a lot of things that happen in the process. Did you grow up in a really philanthropic family? Did you have role models that were serving? Like where, what were your early roots of kind of charity, philanthropy, volunteering when you were young?
It's a wonderful question, and it infused my family culture and my upbringing. Both of my parents were intensively philanthropic, constantly volunteering on a weekly basis. My mom was always involved in so many different things. One of the things that I always thought was really cool is that she took children's books and she transcribed them into Braille. And so,
Oh, wow.
and those are the days before the Braille typewriters. And so you had to actually literally pinprick each of the letters. And I just remember
Wow.
her doing that, what might be a very tedious task, just, for pages and pages. So it
Wow.
So spiritually in my family, the message was, you are not free until your brothers and sisters are free.
Oh.
And so it was everything. It's not something, it's part of my DNA That's how I
And
feel.
it's fascinating because I really think, and hearing you talk about even the alumni of your own program, how you're asking them to come back and do this, it's that same, seed of compassion we're trying to place in the next generation that our families placed in us. So
Yes.
I think it's just I'm always fascinated because that seed might sit there dormant for a really long time, and you never know when it's gonna germinate, and, but it is there. It is
Yes.
there, and I think
Yes.
that's just it's just always interesting to me. So, I know there's kind of a co-founder and,
Two,
Char
actually.
oh, 2, yeah, so give us the backstory give us your backstory first of how you got to be to Connections, and then whichever one you wanna tell first, either the
I think you
Connections
need
that
our origin story.
okay, why don't you start with that?
And it's a long one.
That's okay. We got
So,
time.
okay. So there used to be a place called the Ojai Foundation. And I believe now it's called Tova. This was a place that was a mecca for all kinds of philosophical and spiritual leaders, Thich Nhat Hanh, back in the 70s. There was a man named Jack Zimmerman who, and this part of the story I need to get more information about, but essentially a program over time became cultivated, which was called Counsel. There was a school in Santa Monica that was started by a man named Paul Cummins called Crossroads. And Paul and Jack were friends. And Jack said, let's bring this to Crossroads. Crossroads implemented this program. They called it Mysteries. I know there's going to be a lot of names.
Okay, it's okay.
So when in 1994, when I graduated college, I, through a series of people, became networked and connected with Paul, with Crossroads, and I was trained to be able to deliver this program, which we call Connections.
Got it.
Then the following year, Paul Cummins started a new school called New Roads, which still exists in Santa Monica. And he recruited me as part of the founding team, and everybody was trained. And this was the social emotional foundation for our school. New Roads had a second location in South Los Angeles because one of Paul's missions was to bring private school education to communities that had not been exposed to those kinds of whole child, social, emotional, enriched environments.
Right.
And eventually it became unsupportable financially. But Charlotta Johnson, who was my principal, my mentor, and is one of the co-founders of Calibrate, she said, I'm not abandoning these kids and families. And she started a charter school called Community Harvest.
Okay.
And the reason why that I punctuate that is because a huge part of our team are Community Harvest alumni. And when I was doing my master's thesis in educational therapy, I couldn't decide what I wanted to choose for my thesis. And at that time, there was a reunion of Community Harvest / New Roads alumni celebrating 10 years out of high school. So they're now 28. Okay. And they invited me and they say, we're going to come together and we're going to sit in Connections. And I'm thinking, you're not going to have a party bus? You're not all meeting at a bar? No, you're going to come and sit in someone's house and do Connections. And then I went to my professor and I said, can I make this my focus, my thesis? And so I ended up doing extensive research on programs like Connections, finding out that there had been data that had been done by UCLA and Rand a long time ago on Counsel. So I collected all of that over the course of the year, plus surveyed all these alumni. And everybody said that Connections was the foundation that allowed them to thrive. And 95% of those students went on to have post-secondary degrees.
Oh, wow.
As compared to 17% of their local peers attending other high schools.
That's huge.
Huge.
That's amazing. So at that moment, did you say this needs to be a nonprofit?
No.
Because
no. So I turned 50. I turned 50 and I took Charlotta with me to Taos, New Mexico, which is like my second home. And I was exposing her to this concept of an earth ship, which is this completely off the grid, self-sustaining house. And we're sitting in the earth ship. And I said to her, wouldn't it be fun to bring a group of kids from LA, come camp in New Mexico and learn this technology and bring it back to LA? And she said, you need a nonprofit. And I said, no, I don't.
Nobody needs a nonprofit.
I don't. I know how much work that is. No way. And then what happened was over time, then she, as her whittling away on me, she said, and if you do this, you can't start by doing tech. You have to start with connections because everything starts with connections. It builds the foundation for the brains to be receptive to everything else. If you want maximum impact, you have to start with connections. And she's right, in my opinion. And then I said to the alumni, what do you think? And the alumni were like, yes, we must do this. And so then I was said, okay, I guess this is, I'm being guided by a spirit greater than me.
Well, and that's the way it usually works. Let's just put it this way. None of us knew what we were getting into. None of us woke up and said, when I grow up, I want to be a nonprofit founder. Every single one of us who started a nonprofit, myself included, it happened from a force greater than us that we can't explain, but we knew we're being called to do this work and we couldn't walk away from it. Like you just know, it's like leaving your dog or your child. You would never walk away from you'd never walk away from it. It's the same thing. You can't walk away from it. It's attached to you.
It's true. And I'd like to add an anecdote to that. So there was a little part of me the first few years. Okay, first of all, we started programming in August 2019.
Okay.
We should have been shut down March 2020.
Yeah.
But instead, it had the opposite effect, the pandemic, because suddenly everybody became aware. If they didn't know the term social emotional learning, they might have heard it, but more so mental wellness.
Right.
And needing that kind of foundation, that stability, that I think everybody became in touch with. And the need for connection.
Which is innately the cornerstone of your program of what you do is connect people.
Yes. And there was a little part of me that was all along the way. Okay, when we had you guys in our school and we had control over the culture of the school and the fact that connections did infuse everything and inform everything, that's one thing. But now what we're doing is we're walking in to other people's houses, other people's schools, other people's nonprofits. Can this really work and have the same kind of effect that it did on our alumni?
Right.
And then the moment where it was like, all right, I'm in 100%, was one of our partnering nonprofits. Their students receive connections every Saturday morning during the academic calendar for 3 years, 10th, 11th, and 12th grades. And what we have been successful in doing for the most part is matching them with the same facilitators. So they have this intense bond with their connections facilitators who are with them and watch their growth over 3 years, the same group of students. And then we take them on a retreat, kind of like a little rite of passage retreat. And when I sat in connections with those kids for the first time, I thought, oh my God, we did it. We can do this. And that was the moment when that was it. 100%.
You're in.
All in.
Yeah. You're in. You know that.
Yeah.
So talk to me, because starting, you have a proven program, so you're already in a huge advantage in the scheme of things, because most of us that start this don't have that. So you had a lifetime of experience. You have all of these things, but at the end of the day, you're starting a business. And you're starting a business that relies on people helping you and giving you money. And it's a really difficult business model. So talk to me about some of the challenges in the early, in the beginnings. And what year was this, Marcy, when you actually became a 501c3?
We became a 501c3 in 2018, but I spent the first year cultivating relationships.
Right.
So for example, attending Watts Gang task force meetings, just really wanting to get to know people, because I know this from being an educator in schools, particularly schools in South LA. It's collectivistic cultures and relational based. And it's really critical to have the parents buy-in and really
100%.
critical. So, yeah. So I knew that I was going to need to be able to meet people and listen to people. So that was a year of that. So we started programming August 2019.
Got it.
So it's
Well,
been 4.5 years
and for a little
during a pandemic.
Oh, I know, which we still feel like we're all reeling from it,
Yes.
right? So back to your challenges. So you're starting this besides the pandemic, which obviously, and for a lot of people, the pandemic ended up being, for a lot of us, myself included with the nonprofit that I run, a new opportunity to realize you can present things on Zoom and a new way to connect to audiences. So there were gifts in that too. But just talking about the challenges of starting this business. I mean, where you met people, which is brilliant. You create a community to our earlier point, which is the cornerstone of everything. You were creating the connections that you're preaching. And then what were some of those big hurdles that you came up against?
I mean, the every nonprofit is, unless you're starting with some kind of investment capital, you're having to build a fundraising muscle. And
Yep.
it's and so I feel like that's, it's not a unique challenge. It
No.
is the challenge. I think
Yep.
something that I had, me being completely green and ignorant,
As we all are, by the way.
just realizing kind of, I don't want to call them games, but every system has its, I don't even know what the word is for
Process.
it, but yeah. And so you got to have credit to build credit.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's really, you can't just come in and say, hi, we're a new guy. You have to have some kind of record. Like, who else has
Right.
given to you?
Right.
So where are you going to get your first domino to
Right.
fall to be able
Right.
to start? And we had some really lucky opportunities. So, for instance, as a result of, I mean, it's a terrible thing. I don't mean to make it sound like a celebration, but because of what happened to George Floyd,
Right.
there was Buscaino, who was the council member in the 15th district at the time. He decided to create a special grant because there was this reallocation of money going on in the city
Right.
as a result of that event. And so this was an open application grant where, really anybody, doesn't matter the size of your nonprofit, those are really special opportunities. And
Right.
it's just really that you need to demonstrate, clearly all the nuts and bolts of how are you going to accomplish this and what's your budget, blah, 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 but
Right.
also demonstrate that you have community support. So you essentially had to produce a petition of local people. And because we had built relationships, we also found out about this grant through a relationship with someone that we knew who worked in Imperial Courts, which is one of the housing projects. And because of us just really getting that information and working it to the maximum,
Right.
we were allocated a grant from the city of $50,000.
That's so
And
great.
and yes, so
And
that was one of our first dominoes to really help us to start getting this fundraising machine going.
And those are kind of the signs that show you that you're somehow on the right path because you question it constantly going, what am I doing? How am I going to do this? How is this going to happen? Because we all start out thinking we're just going to help one child, one person. We're just going to help one little group. And before we know it, it's the next group and the next group. And we're our own best and worst enemies because we want to help more and then we need to raise more and the cycle continues and we push and push and push. But that's how the world changes and that's how we get it done. So talk to me about when you have these challenges and when it's hard and you're a mom, you have laundry, you have a husband, you have a life, you have bills, you have the same stressors we all have in life. But I feel like for founders, our stressors, especially in the line of work that we do, are a little different because someone isn't going to get educated if we don't raise this money. Someone isn't going to get the skill they need to be successful in life. It isn't like we're not going to, produce enough, widgets at the factory that day or whatever. We have the backs of people that we go to sleep every night thinking about the people that we serve. So what fuels you when you have those days going, how am I going to be a mom, get to the store, get the laundry done, write this grant, do this work, run this program, what fuels you in those moments to keep going when you just think, what have I done?
D'Anthony, Lorena,
Mhm.
Van, Becky,
Yeah.
Chris,
Yeah.
Avantre,
Right.
Alana, Rakina. I could name all 120 people who I work with, our collective Calibrate Cosmos. I work with the most extraordinary individuals. And the moments that I get to go and visit our sites, I'm thinking of a little fourth grade girl named Ari and her hugs and smiles. And she has a mom named Brittany who has the biggest heart of maybe anybody I've ever met. And I think about volunteers like Lynn, who basically retired and made Calibrate her job. And I think about our Community Harvest alumni who just really get this and just really are the heart of Calibrate, pumping all that understanding into the rest of the organization. Our board is miraculous. Our community partners, Mark and Trey, our program partners, Tina, Miss Samara. I mean, I can just every single so Calibrate, right? We've got this nest sun kind of logo, and we had to me the circle is these are our children, and we're building this nest around them, and that can just radiate into infinity. And each one of these spokes to me is like one of these persons and components of our organization. And it is my son. It's that just literally, like when I open my eyes in the morning, it's that whole entire vibe of people that hashtag spread feel good, as our alumna Becky says, it's just, yeah, it's that love. It is pure love. So
Well, and
that's
I
what gets me out
think
of bed.
that we get paid in ways that are so much bigger than a paycheck. We obviously don't do this for the money. That's not why we do this work. This work is about these people that we meet, the people that we serve, the connections that we make, the community. And I sometimes think about that, Harry met Sally when she looks over and says, "I'll have what she's having." I feel like people look at us sometimes like, "What's she doing? Like, why is she smiling? Why is she joyful?" Even though we somehow have this weight of the world on us, I think we have an innate joy that we are privileged to get through serving. And I
Yeah,
think that there's just something that's that keeps you coming back for more even when things are hard, because it's kind of an addiction too, because when you help people, you want more of it because it feels so great to help people. You
it's
just want a
fun.
little.
It's really creative work. The trick is just how do you keep burnout at bay? How do you set
Yeah.
boundaries with the self care part?
Yep.
And of course, then there's also the testimonials and the feedbacks from the work that we do, right? I mean, to sit in a connections and hear a teenager say, literally, this program kept me from committing suicide. I mean, hardcore
Wow.
stuff, hardcore.
So
And those are
so
the moments, yeah, go
so
ahead.
talk to me about that, because we talked about kind of, those sterile grants that you write and that one that you got that first launched you. But let's talk about impact, because impact isn't just a grant, it isn't just a percentage of people served. How do you measure that a child didn't take their life because of the work that you do? How do you measure that? So talk to me what you think impact for Calibrate is, what your impact is, in how whatever you want to describe it, whether it's a story, whether it's um, an example like that. What is your impact? And this is not a grant impact question.
Right, because immediately it's like you say that, I'm like, go to the numbers. We've
Yeah.
reached more than 3,000 people since August 2019. Yeah. And we've trained, more than 100 people.
And that's great. But
Yes,
but some of
yes,
the impact is,
yes,
like, I
yes,
run the youth leadership organization. How do
yes,
you measure leadership? How do you measure when a child says, "This program kept me from taking their life"? That's like an impossible thing to measure to me, but
yes.
that's an
Okay.
impact that's real, right?
So, yes. So at the end of each program cycle, we have surveys. And the surveys are administered based on the kids' literacy skills. And it's qualitative data, even though there are quantitative parts to it where they're checking boxes, which then the Google survey can then extract to give you percentages really
Right.
quickly. But it's the
Right.
qualitative testimonials that are the most important. And there's two ways I want to answer this. So one is, last semester we were super lucky that we had students who were seniors in the geology department at Cal Poly Pomona, and they interned with us, and they had their own question they wanted to answer with our data. So they took a random sample of 35 eighth graders who had received between 8 to 10 connection sessions over a 5-week period. And what they did was they honed into, in the qualitative data, where children were able to articulate specific observable changed behaviors in other environments outside of connections. So, for example, I'm no longer fighting with my mom in the morning to go to school. I'm no longer fighting with my mom to get my homework done. I am raising my hand in class. I'm not afraid to ask my teacher for help. So those kinds of things,
Right.
where they were able to show what we call in education a generalization of behaviors. And 67% of those, that random sample of 35 eighth graders over a 5-week period, 67% were able to describe that. 100% said things like, I feel more confident, I'm a better listener. But 67% of the 100% were actually able to give us how, where,
right,
which is a remarkable statistic, truly.
Right. And those are really hard to get, because we try to do the same thing, measuring our kids' impact. And, we know we have a 40-year-old program. We know it works, but how you get that impact.
Yes.
And it's a frustrating thing, because you see a changed human, and then you're trying to put on paper or to donors, well, this is how and they're like, well, how? And you're like, oh man. I always use the analogy as a mom. Living my life as a mom is hard enough. Documenting and creating scrapbooks about every last thing that you did is an impossible task. This is the same thing with nonprofits. We're trying to drive the car in the race, and then someone's asking us, how did the engine work? Can you stop and pull it apart and show us how you did that? And you're like, but I'm in the race. I can't stop and document it. I'm in it. And that's where the challenge that we're given to measure our work.
Right.
And it's
but
really
because
hard.
It's very true. It's absolutely 100% true. We have a unique insight because we sit in these connection circles, which are listening, storytelling circles.
Right.
And so we get those opportunities to hear the things like the suicidal ideation or the decision to go back to college, and for people to speak that out loud anecdotally. We had, so I had a bunch of kids graduate high school, and they were going to be first generation kids to go to the East Coast and go to different colleges on the East Coast. And I was panicked to create a connections program for them virtually so that they could come, because I know that there's, with first gen students, there can be imposter syndrome and all kinds of things. The rate of attrition can be very high for them.
Right.
And I wanted them to stay in college and finish. And at some point they were like, Marcy, chill out. We don't really need this, because actually we're kind of doing it on our own. We take the train and we meet each other at least 2 times a month. And when we sit together, even if we're in a restaurant having a meal together, we're checking in and we're asking each other, and we're soliciting and giving each other equal chance to tell each other stories. And we're basically, it's not a formal connections, but we're using tools from connections to keep ourselves connected, to keep ourselves supporting one another. So they were like, we don't need to get on and do this virtually. We're doing it in person ourselves.
So great.
So those kinds of anecdotal, that's gold.
So great. I talked to, and by the time this episode airs, you'll be a few episodes after, but I did interview recently the founder of the Posse Foundation, who sends posses of underserved students to college so that they have each other and they stay in school for that exact reason. So they stay connected. So they have like-minded friends, people understand their story, where they came from, how they so they have each other to get through school, and they have the same thing. They have a 95% success rate of staying in school and graduating and going on to higher education because of that support, which is exactly what the tools you're giving your students, which is beautiful. I love that. I love that. I love that. We had a lot of, at Urban Day, we talked a lot about that too. But let's talk about Calibrate. So you can't get into a role of starting an organization without being a dreamer of some sort? You have dreams for your students that you're serving. You have dreams for how much money you want to raise. You have dreams for what you want the program to become. But what's the big dream? If you could dream any dream for Calibrate, what does that look like? What's the big dream?
It's not sexy, but it's an endowment.
Oh,
And the reason why, if we're really creating an organization that's of the people for the people, and we're really fulfilling our mission of elevating these young leaders from our communities to come in and take over, they are not coming from privilege and networks and access, and we have to set them up. Doesn't mean they're not going to have to learn how to fundraise, because as we know, endowments only provide a portion of your budget. But even just to have a minimum operating expenses that they don't have to freak out about. Because I have seen some of the toxicities that get created in these neighborhoods by nonprofits that originate in these neighborhoods, and the kinds of competitive spirits and the types of grants that they're going after, which are one time only. They're not repeated grants where you can sustain yourself. And so it's just a constant scramble. And I just really want our young adults to be able to have their own dreaming and not be just mired. I know that the Community Harvest alumni want a school again.
So that would be a big dream, right?
Yeah. And I know that, and for them, it's recreating what they had in their neighborhood so that talent stays in their neighborhood. And then, I know they would love to see connections all around the world. They've talked about that too. So,
you planted a lot of seeds in a lot of people, so you never know what's going to harvest, to use all of your words, from all the connections that you created, right?
There you go, Heidi.
Because this is how it happens.
Calibrate now.
Well, I'm just saying, this is the way the world works. You do something good, you plant the seed, it goes on and on and on, which is why we have these conversations and hoping that people listening want to do the same thing, and they have those same desires. So this has been an incredible journey that you've been on, and it's obviously, you're young, you're in the middle of it, but what life lessons have you learned so far from this work? I mean, it's there's got to be incredible lessons every day in witnessing and hearing these kids talk about their lives and then seeing who they become. So what lessons have you learned from all of this?
I was talking to my husband, Joe, about this. There's no doubt that I have been pushed to stretch, and I have been challenged, and I have been grown, and I've grown a lot. I've been working in these communities for decades. So it was really like, I feel like what I have learned along this way is about leadership, I would say the most. And the anecdote that comes to mind, when we were at New Road School, we had this multi-purpose room. This was the first year of New Roads. And our head of school had hired this graduate student from UCLA who was from China. And the idea was that on Fridays, at the end of the day, children are all going to sing together with this grad student. There was no other staff member put in the room with this woman. And at that time, we had about 67 kids at New Road School. So here's this young person from another country needing to lead a group of 67 unruly middle school kids.
Yeah.
On Friday, the last period of the day. Like, what are you thinking? Right? So I had the classroom next door. I'm hearing this outrageous noise and chaos. What is going on? I walk into the room. The kids are on the countertops running back and forth.
Oh my God.
They're like, it was like an 80s movie, throwing the paper balls, the whole thing. And I'm looking around. I don't see her anywhere. I came to find later that she was hiding under the desk.
Oh my God.
So, and it's 67 kids. And in that moment, I realized I'm the adult.
Right.
I'm the adult. Like, I have to control this.
Right.
And I'm, 25 years old,
Right.
but I'm the adult.
Right.
So this sound came out of me, and to this day, these they're now in their 40s. They talk
Right.
about this sound that came out of me. Stop. Like, kids actually like froze in motion, like
Right.
cartoon characters. That is what I feel a lot of the time with Calibrate. In terms of, I'm the person that so many people are looking to.
Right.
And as I said to you before we started this podcast, I am an introvert. So
you're doing a great job of hiding it, by the way. Great job. Great job. Bravo.
But something I've learned is that you can actually lead from behind, and that what I have to lean on is the organizational culture that we're creating, because it is one of shared leadership. We are the circle. We want to be the principles and values that we espouse in Connections, that we're all holding this up. We all have equal voice. And I have a lot of amazing people who can independently and successfully go and take the ball on something and run with it. So really, it's what I'm doing is kind of just, I'm on the steering wheel of the ship, in the sense of, let's just keep, ourselves tack north, but while everybody else is, running around. And
well, you're speaking my language, because I run a youth leadership. We teach leadership to thousands of kids a year. And we say true leaders lead from behind. A true leader is in the back, quietly shuffling their herd forward. They don't realize they're being led, because they're going in the same direction. They don't know why, but they do because of you, but they don't think they're being pushed, pulled, demanded. They're just being led, but it's an inverted triangle. And we always say, people think the leader's at the top of the triangle, but flip it upside down. The real leader's at the bottom.
That's beautiful. I love that.
And it's exactly what you're doing. And we also say, you cannot lead unless you serve. And obviously, you've shared your beautiful journey of service, which you are doing every day and have been doing for a very long time, and that your mother and your father taught you how to do. So how do you think you've changed through all this, Marcy? Do you think you've changed since you've been doing this work?
I mean, that was part of that same conversation. I mean, stretched and grown, learning how to not take things personally, not trip, not overthink, boundaries on self-care,
Good one.
that weight of the world feeling that you described earlier. Like, I remember when I was a little girl, when I would get anxious, my sister would say to me, "And what's the worst thing that would happen?" And it's like, it will all collapse. And what's astounding to realize is that's not true with Calibrate. Like,
Right.
If, God forbid, we didn't have a penny in the bank, we're not going to stop. This is a community of people who believe so deeply in the programs and the mission that it will just keep marching forward until we get the next infusion of cash.
Right.
So just, it's okay. And there's in Los Angeles, there's this entertainment culture that I feel like drives things, where if you don't take this chance, you've missed the opportunity. If you don't get this grant, you've missed there's that kind of feeling. And that's not true.
Right.
Another grant will come along. So just that kind of woosa, as one of our facilitators says, just, so
it always does. And I have to tell my program director all the time, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. It's going to work out. And we had something go a little sideways this week. And he was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe this isn't happening. What are we going to do?" And then in the next phone call was, "Hey, can you help us with it?" And what went away was replaced, right? And that it just, when you do good work, like the work that you're doing, when it always works itself out. It just does. It just does, because we're doing such good work, and there's so much positive energy and momentum behind us, our work, the people. And you and I both know, and every nonprofit founder I've ever interviewed, and there are hundreds of them, they don't like to talk about themselves. They like to talk about their work, and they like to talk about their team and their people, because we both know we can't build anything without this incredible community that we are privileged to be a part of and that we get to help build. And that village that you talk so lovingly about and what fuels you. So I love that because I do think it does all work out. But boy, there are moments that we're down on our knees saying, "Please God, please send money, please send money."
Yeah.
So talk to me about how we can support you, how we can find you, how we can volunteer, how we can donate, how we can learn more. Give us the good stuff.
Okay. So our website is calibrate.earth.
All right.
EARTH. It's a very unique domain name.
It is.
And we take all forms of financial support, stock, you name it. So people can contact me directly, Marcie, MARCIE, at calibrate.earth. We have all the channels, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, X, and Facebook. Instagram is really our number one, which we're at calibrate.earth. YouTube, we're starting to build out some fun videos. That's at Calibrate Earth with no dot. LinkedIn, we're starting to build out. It's Calibrate. What I would say is invite us to come do connections for you. We work with Fortune 500 companies that shall not be named because we've signed NDAs, but it is an amazing team building tool for your staff, for your students, your organization, your family, your friends. We would love to come over and show you what we do. We have an event on May 4th, which is a cultivation event to build our donor base. If there's somebody who's listening to this beautiful podcast, which I hear is going to be coming out with a book called Front Row Seat to Humanity, if you're listening to this, contact me at Marcie at calibrate.earth and come and join us for a community engagement event on May 4th.
I love that. Oh, yeah. Marcie, this is all so great, so beautiful. You and I do such similar work that I just love seeing. I feel like it's a mirror a little bit that I get to see your joy in talking about what you do and who you serve, and it just makes me happy. And I hope everyone listening is as happy and excited as I am about this conversation that we had today. So thank you for sharing with us, and thank you for your service, and thank you for all you do to make charity matter. We're so grateful.
Thank you, Heidi. You're so gracious and joyful as well. Wonderful to spend time with you today.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Charity Matters podcast. I really enjoyed talking to our guest, Marcie, about what it takes to start a business that truly changes people's lives. I think her comment about leading from behind was so inspiring and true. To learn more about these modern day heroes, or if you'd like to reach out to us, visit us at charity-matters.com. or connect with us on Instagram at Charity Matters. If you enjoyed our conversation, we would love it if you shared this with your family and friends. And please don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. But more than that, thank you for caring, for believing in goodness, and for being a part of our movement. You are exactly what the world needs more of. Remember that together we can make a difference, one small act of kindness at a time. Charity matters. See you next time.